Vayishlach Yehoshua Shnei Anashim Meraglim. So in the end of the Haftarah of this week's Parsha, it discusses the spies that Yehoshua sends when he finally is conquering the land. It says he sends two spies, and in Likutei Torah it explains in a mimer which begins with these same words, Hachiluk ben Meraglim sheshalach Yehoshua lemeraglim sheshalach Moshe. What's the difference between the spies that Yehoshua sent to those that Moshe sent? The Meraglim sheshalach Moshe kasiv. Yeah, you guys know this one?
I know this.
All right. When it comes to the spies that Moshe sent, it's written Shlach lecha l'daitcha, ani eini mitzav lecha. Right? You send them. Rashi comes in and says, "Why say lecha? You send them." So Rashi says l'daitcha. In other words, on your own opinion, like with your own understanding. Ani eini mitzav lecha. This is not officially, just so you know, this is not a commandment. Right? It sounds like send spies. It sounds like Hashem is ordering him to do so. But it says shlach lecha. What is that little lecha doing over there in order to indicate that it's not a commandment coming from Hashem? Right? If you want to do it, Moshe, you do it. Mashen kin shiluch hameraglim to Yehoshua. When it comes to Yehoshua's spies, it's not the same. Right? Lo haya midaitu ela al pi tzivu Hashem. There was actually a commandment from Hashem. You guys are going. This is a divine order. So that's a big difference. Why one to the other? V'od chiluk. Another distinction: the meraglim sheshalach Yehoshua hayirak liyireicho. That when Yehoshua was commanded to send spies, he was commanded to send them specifically to Jericho, which is called menu'ula shel Eretz Yisrael. It's called the lock of the land. Right? Basically, what does it mean? The lock of the land. It's like if you unlock that, you get the whole land. Right? Well, it's a little bit sad that we don't really have that unlocked at present, but we'll talk about that another time.
Well, let's go march on Jericho.
Okay, right? Taru es kol haaretz. Through getting and finding out what's the status in Jericho, that is how you'll spy out the rest of the land. In other words, you can see from there everything that you need to know. We know that Moshe sent spies for 40 days. They went the whole length and width of the land. They didn't just spy out simply one little town and to get a feel, right? Yeah?
I feel like he's meaning this idea that if you conquer Jericho, so you're able to explore Kol Haaretz, not only Kavos, because Rashi says that they did it in the Gam way. In other words, they were going down.
So, what are you talking about, Yehoshua or?
No, the Meraglim.
Of Yehoshua?
The middle part.
Wait, the spies of Yehoshua or?
The spies of Moshe.
So Moshe, they did go to.
They didn't. They went around in a circle.
Right.
While Yehoshua, he says, is Kol Haaretz. They were able to spy the whole land. Because Moshe's spies, it's really weird what they did because they went around the country. So they went up. They went down towards Elat. They turned left towards Yamsuf.
Right.
Up the shore.
Yeah, but Pashtus, what it means is that they spied out the whole land, not that they left parts off. It
says
meaning to say that through seeing the one place, they would get a feeling and an understanding for what's going on in the whole land. They did not go and see the whole land, as is presently available to be seen in the Tanakh. Right? They just went there and they went back.
Is it just like a high?
Quite in a hurry. What's that?
High vantage point where you can like.
No, I think it's like a microscope slide. If you take one slice, you can see everything.
I think it's also, as we're going to soon see, somewhat of a spiritual concept that there's something. Yeah, I think you're right. There's something geographically significant about a vantage point. I don't know if it's just in seeing, but also like in knowing the pulse of the land. So, two main differences. Moshe was not commanded. Yehoshua was commanded. Yehoshua sent these two spies. Moshe spent 12. He doesn't really make a big deal out of that. And the other thing is the extent of their spying. Moshe's spies sent with the length and width of the whole land, and Yehoshua just to Yericho. Yes, sir.
So you said that the lacha made it not a command.
Mm-hmm.
But what about lech lacha? Wasn't that a command to Abraham?
It was a command to Abraham. Yeah, I guess the idea here is that they don't learn the same way. It's also a little bit of a, I think, there's I don't know how to answer that exactly. I mean, there's a lot of lachas in the Torah, and I guess they're all like serving at some different purpose. Why was this lacha considered superfluous? Because I guess it just didn't need to be in there. Maybe the lacha of, in other words, when you're talking about lech lacha, there's also another perush that it means go to yourself, right? So it's like he was actually telling him maybe a couple of things at the same time. Like, in other words, there's different meanings.
I thought that was one of the tests of Abraham, so it's not like he had to do it, it's just he did it, he passed the test.
No, but he was commanded to go. And the test was, are you going to listen to the command, even though it's telling you to wander? Okay, that's a good question. We're going to have to look back into that, but let's get back on the train. So he says, chapter 2, Nekudas habir bazeh. What is the point of this whole explanation? Shatziva de kibush haaretz, beruchnias, hu bekol atzivoyim shebetorah inyan nitzchi bechol dor v'dor. That the commandment to go and conquer the land, at least spiritually, is like all commandments in the Torah, something which is eternal and lasts forever. There's no such thing, right? Even that commandment of Lech Lecha, which was said to one man in a specific period of time, it's something which is eternal in the Torah and applies in all times, in all places. So even though it's something that looks like temporal in the Torah's view, if it's in the Torah, it's an eternal lesson for all time. Spiritually, this is still in place. And so it is here, the idea of spying out the land. It's an eternal concept. The kol echad ve'echad miYisrael tzrich lichbosh kol hakochos v'inyanim legufo v'nafsho abahamis. And what is the spying out the land? What is the conquest of the land? That every Jew has this commandment to go and conquer all of his kochos, all of your different forces, your powers, your spheros, basically your identity, your personality, and all matters of your body and your animal soul, right? That like you take control of your passions, your desires, etc. And that part of you is called Eretz Canaan. So what do we just learn from here? That the entire story of the Torah actually is just sort of changed in our eyes. That the whole concept of the Avos in the land and then going into Mitzrayim and the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim, getting the Torah, coming back to the land, it turns out that the whole conquest of the land is really a metaphorical concept. Besides the fact that it's also spiritual, speaking physically about the land, talking about your land. And therefore, like the story is that, something about Yaakov and the Bnei Yisrael, which is like the soul is coming to the Eretz Canaan, which is like the body and all your powers, and the purpose of our life is to conquer it and make it a dir b'tachtonim, bring the Aron there and the Ark and everything. This is basically the whole story of the Torah. Mm-hmm. Every single mitzvah, every single thing that's happening there, the entire story is really a personal story about self-development in connection with the rest of the world and its literal meaning on the places and times that it's talking about. So he says this is the Indian of conquering your powers, your physical body, your animal soul, all of that which is called Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan inside of you, and do what with it? Lasosum kelim lelukus, to make them Eretz Yisrael, to turn the land into something godly, which is to turn your animal self into a Jew. What is the difference between Jericho and the whole rest of the land in terms of your own soul? And the difference is that Yerecho represents the garments of the soul, the thought, speech, and the action. Right? Just a little note, just so everyone understands the construction of the soul, that you have 10, just like your body, you have your actual body, and then you have garments that you put on top of it. 3 levels of garments, in fact. You have your underwear, your shirt, and your jacket. Sorry, I said underwear in class. Gotcha, caught off guard there.
Who's wearing underwear?
That means you don't have any thoughts in your head, so you have to be very careful with that joke. Okay, anyway, so you have your body and your garments. So too the soul has its own body and it has its own garments. What's the body of the soul? Anybody? What's the body of the soul?
Sounds like Nefesh Bahamas.
What is the body of the Nefesh Bahamas? No problem. Each soul is likened to a body. What is the body of the Nefesh Bahamas? How would you describe that in other words? the Sfiros, right? The Eser Kochos HaNefesh. So your Chabad, Chagas, Nahim, which is basically like your body, it's like your soul really is sourced in the essence of God, and it says like Kulam Matimus va'av echad lekulanu. It says in Tanya, they're all twins. We have one Father. It's at a certain level. There's no distinguishing factors between your soul and my soul. At a certain level, it's chelek elokam imal mamish. It's just a piece of God. God is one. No description. So we all start there. But then, just like quickly afterwards, you are given a body that your unique soul, like your soul, which is actually not unique, right? Which is just a piece of God. It's going to come and be able to enter into a body to express itself into certain powers that actually limit it, but at the same time they give it a form of expression. Because if it doesn't have a body, it sort of stays in a way that it's just in potential, right? So this, you crawl into your 10 soul powers. So this is like a body. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are fat, some people are skinny, some people are black, some people are white, right? So you're given blue eyes, brown eyes, the whole 9 yards, smart, not smart, intelligent. You have a whole soul body. And this is your 10 spheros, your unique sort of imprint. And then upon that soul body, everybody is granted the 3 garments of the soul, which is the thought, speech, and action. So what's very unique about those? Why are they called garments? What's different? If I can just give you guys a little quiz here. What's the difference between, let's say, your thoughts versus your Chabad? Chabad is the 3 soul powers of, Chokhmah, Bina, and Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So that's something connected with your mind, right? So then we're going to say, then you have another thing which is called Machshava, which is a garment of the soul, which is a completely different thing, right? It's like the difference between your underwear and your brain, okay? Why? But what? According to what we're saying, so what's the difference exactly between the two? What's the difference between your chokhmah and your machshava?
One's changeable.
One's changeable. That is one of the differences. Yes, right? Because what does it mean that your chokhmah is not changeable? Is your chokhmah not changeable?
It grows.
Wait, so your chokhmah is changeable, and your machshava is not? I thought you got me because I thought you were thinking the opposite. Yeah. So your chokhmah is changeable, you're saying, because it grows. Okay, and your garments?
They grow with you.
You're saying you could put on another set of garments.
Machshava isn't just the ability to think.
So what is chokhmah then?
Anything. No, machshava could be I'm thinking about a blue sky now with yellow bird in it. It's just the ability. It's an ability.
Well,
what is chokhmah?
Chokhmah is connected to Hashem.
So chokhmah is it's a sector, intelligence sector. So it could be cars, it could be planes. The whole physics behind it.
No, but in your brain, you have a sphera inside of yourself called chokhmah. What does it do? And what's different from what it does to what you have, which is called machshava does? These are not theoretical things, just the realms of chokhmah. Hang on, let's just go one person at a time and then we'll go around. What's that?
No chokhmah.
What's that?
If he has thoughts, you won't have the ability to see physics. You won't have it because you won't be able to see the connections between the maths. You won't be able to grasp maths. You could just think. You can't see the chokhmah.
Okay. Yeah.
One's physical, the other one's spiritual.
What's that?
One's physical, the other one's spiritual. Or the set.
What, thought is physical?
For this world, yeah, because it's like a physical thing. It's on a body. It's connected to
Chokhmah's in your brain.
Yeah, but that's connected to the source. That's connected to Hashem.
No, it's literally in your body as well. Right? If you're saying machshava is a thing, because that itself is a pretty big jump, right?
It's not,
so it's right, it's spiritual. Thought is also spiritual, right? And guess what? Chokhmah is also spiritual, and they're both sitting inside your brain.
But it results in physical things.
Your thought?
I think, yeah.
And then your chokhmah doesn't? As he's saying, like, how did this bridge get built? Right, from a chokhmah that you had. I'm sorry, I'm giving you guys a hard time. I want to make the point.
It's expressed.
Okay.
If it didn't have that machshava, it's like the chokhmah is naked. It doesn't have this, and people don't want to look at something. It's like too much for someone to handle.
Okay, let me. The way I like to answer this question, because I do think it's a difficult question, is it comes up in Once you realize that you have this question, you have to figure out what the answer is quick, or you're just like, you're in trouble. So the best way to answer it, as far as I understand, is to tell me the difference between machshava and emotions. What's the difference between, I know it's a strange term, but what's the difference between thoughts and feelings? We just discussed right now the difference between thoughts and intelligence, which is a very fine line. It's hard to understand what you mean, the difference between your thoughts and your intelligence. Although I think you're onto something about it. What is the difference between thoughts and emotions?
Emotions are causation of your thoughts.
Emotions are causation of your thoughts. I agree with you. Here's the thing. Thoughts, I'm going to just break it down. Thoughts are literally letters. That's what they are. You know, when we're talking about the garments of the soul. You have the garments, let's just say in thought and speech. Deed is a little bit something different, but let's say in thought and speech, your garments are letters. That's why in a certain sense, maybe that's what you meant, they don't change. Noach, is that what you meant? In that sense, they don't change, right? Although we normally think of garments as something specifically which changes, because you can take them off, turn them on, whereas your intellect, you cannot change it. But in this capacity, you're right.
Like you mentioned time.
So it's switched what you're saying, but there's a point in your statement as well. But here we're saying that these letters, right? It's going to be that you're just literally dealing with 22 letters of the alphabet. That's what your variables of what you can think. You just put them together in different combinations, but they're just these letters, right? What is an emotion? On the other hand, an emotion is actually there's no letters involved. At least not to the naked eye, with emotions. On the contrary, it's a feeling. You're having an experience which is sometimes indescribable. That's why when a person is gripped with an intense level of emotion, they can't talk. They can't even think, right? It's like you've been taken over by anger, you've been taken over by love, right? And so the idea is then, what is thought then? When you're able to slowly contain that emotion, and then filter it through a pattern of 22 letters, then a tiny ray of that experience of a feeling is able to sort of go into this design of letters and then express to yourself what it is that you're feeling. You can think about what you're feeling, but the amount of emotion that goes into those letters of thought is like a tiny drop compared to what the experience of the emotion itself is. Because the whole point is that you're putting them into a garment. You're wrapping up. And the whole thing of emotion does not get wrapped up. Only like the edge of the emotion gets wrapped up inside of the letters of thought. You with me there so far? So that's what it means a garment. It's like as you said, it's a form of your thought, speech, and action of your soul are completely different, serve a completely different function than the 10 spheros of your soul. The 10 spheros of your soul is your actual experience. And so let's go back to the idea of chokhmah real quick. That's why I went from emotion, because then we can more easily climb up and to understand what chokhmah is, right?
Just getting up.
That you have, just like, right, chokhmah is higher. Chokhmah, bin, and das are higher than the emotions, not lower, right? They're even like a deeper dimension of yourself. So if emotion itself is not letters, but it's like experiential, then this is what you were going for. Then the chokhmah of your soul is also not letters. You're not thinking. It's not a power of thought where you're like, now it's hard to distinguish it because whenever it's going to come on, it's going to invest itself into letters, just like emotions. Usually when you feel emotions, you right away can think about them because they right away invest themselves into these kalim which hold them and express themselves to you. But the actual emotion is a feeling. And the actual intellect, the chokhmah bin and das, it's not, you can't call it a feeling because it's beyond emotion, but it's like an intellectual experience, like you were saying, like understanding physics. Now, once you actually put the understanding of physics into thought letters, you've already condensed the actual raw chokhmah bin and das, and you've just taken the edge of it, you've put that into letters so it can express itself to you. But like your like pure mathematical mind, let's just say, or your ability to just like intuit things, it's like pre-verbal, right? It's a power of the soul which is extremely deep inside of this. That's why this, like, ultimately your soul itself rests in your chokhmah, because it's like a wondrous power of sort of like just awareness of intelligence before you're even processing that intelligence into how it makes you feel, and then and for sure before you've even wrapped it into any letters of communication, even to yourself. So the letters are of thought is how you communicate your intellect and your emotion to yourself. And the letters of speech is how you communicate your intellect and your emotion to another person. But the thought, speech, and action are a completely different function, the garments, than what the soul is, which is actually you. Is that helpful in any way? You guys following along?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you said earlier was that the Sephiros were born with a certain set of Sephiros. Like some people have more Chachma, some people might have more Tiferes, whatever, than others. So this is like, I think what you're saying is like that there is that our personality is like genetic. In some way.
Right.
There's something, and if you the father, the mother, the boy, the girl, you know, they have a personality from the very beginning.
Right.
So I think you're saying that part is genetic.
Right.
But what you do with that can be the garments you use.
Yeah. Well, you can.
So it's like you realize that if somebody, for example, sees that I have a tendency to get angry, then you can control that with your thought, speech, and action. And change that, but you can't change the original spirit.
Yeah, you can't change the fact that you're going to get angry, but you can change the fact that you do not have to give words, even thought words, to that anger, in which case the potential anger which is inside of you has no way of expressing itself, and it stays basically unleashed, right? It stays dormant. And it's especially helpful with while you're doing that, you put on other thoughts, which are thoughts of a godly nature, in which case you are giving voice to your godly soul to express its experience. So not only is the animal soul contained, but it's also like overwhelmed by another soul, which is now being given voice to come out of the letters of thought and speech of Torah, which basically it takes over. So it submerges it entirely, the negative experience.
What comes first, the emotion or the thought?
The emotion has to come first, according to what we're saying, right? Now, the intellect comes before the emotion, but both of those things come before the thought, because the thought is just there to contain and filter and ultimately express the intellect and the emotions.
Yeah, because many years ago I learned it's like a circle. Your emotion creates a thought, your thought creates your action creates your circumstance.
Right.
And your circumstance creates a new emotion creates a new thought creates a new
Okay.
circle.
All right, so going back inside, conquering the land, right? What does it all mean? Conquering the land is conquering your animal soul and your nefesh bahamis and making them to a godly Eretz Yisrael. And the difference we're saying now between conquering Yerecho versus conquering the whole land is that conquering Yerecho is all about conquering the garments. Only the conquest is on the thought, speech, and action of your Eretz Canaan. And why does Yerecho specifically go with garments? Yerecho hu melashon reach. First of all, because the word Yerecho comes from the word to smell. V'levushim shaychim l'reach. Right? And the idea is that garments in a general sense are connected with reach. V'keremes halashon hazohar b'reichet l'vushaychu. And we see a what's that? Reach is smell. Right? The word reach means smell. And its smell is specifically connected to garments. And he doesn't explain the intellectual concept behind why that is, but we can look at it ourselves. But he does say there's a hint in the Zohar where it talks about reicha de levushaychu, the smell of the garments, like it says, Yitzchak said to his son Yaakov that like you smell like a garden that Hashem has blessed, right? In other words, he was like there was like a smell of the garments. It's a connection with the smell of the garments, right?
Also, react is like the deepest ability to grasp reality more than eyes and ears. As it says about the Moshiach, you will be able to smell. You will be able to smell the mishpat, be able to smell two bali dinim, and by that.
Right, but okay.
Right, because it's something deep in the machshava, deep in the deep in the mass.
True. So in a certain sense, there's something what you're saying is like higher in the garments than even the soul, perhaps. But what's the idea of something that smells to a garment in a much more simple sense? What we just did was we just brought like a source from the Torah that there's a connection with garments that smell, right? But what does smell have to do with garments in principle is just that when you have, like, let's say a tasty food, right? You have the food itself, the smell that comes off of it is like an external expression, right, of the thing itself. So it's very much like what we're saying about a garment. It's not the thing itself. The smell is something which like exits, escapes, and expresses in this sort of like secondary way. Just like your thoughts are not you. You could change them, right? It's something like exuding from you in a very similar way that smell on an object which has a scent, it's not the object itself. It's like sort of like, it's like something like coming off. So there's a general, just there's a logical connection between smell and garments. Yeah, did you want to say something? Okay. Beklalos haaretz, so that's Yerecha. What is the rest of the land? Eretz Zayin Amamin, the 7 nations. Hem hamidos sheba'adam. So that's referring to your 7 midos. We've just gone into the emotional realm above thought, speech, and action. So the land itself. V'zeu ma she'atziva liYoshua lishloach meraglim hayal sheyelchu rak liYerecha. That's why Yoshua's spies is that they only go to Yerecha. Right, and that's another further proof. They did not specifically go to the rest of the land. Because when it comes down to it, as you said before, like your intellect and your skin color, well, these are genetic things. But what you are going to do with your thought, speech, and action, it's not just whatever you're born with. That's what you have. That's the one thing that you have control of, is that you can do whatever you want with your thought, speech, and action. It's probably one of the most groundbreaking ideas in the whole Tanya. Right, where is his treatment of this notion that your thoughts are merely a garment and you could do whatever you want with them. People in general think that their thoughts are them, and it leads to a lot of negative things, because if you're like having terrible thoughts, you think you're a terrible person, etc., etc. But the reality is that you can just like clear the board, and what you want to put into those letters of thoughts is, even though it takes a tremendous amount of willpower, but certain things, even if you have all the willpower in the world, you're not going to change yourself from black to white. Unless you're Michael Jackson. And even that, you're going to have to spend a lot of money on that. Right? But if you're a regular person, you could just change your thoughts at will, and it's something which, although it takes a strenuous effort, it is in your power to do so. And it's an extremely liberating idea.
There's the whole idea from the Baal Shem Tov being the master of your domain.
What's that?
There's the whole idea from the Baal Shem Tov being the master of your domain.
Right.
You have control of your thoughts.
But really, essentially,
Yeah.
you should go silent when your emotions are overwhelming you. You shouldn't even try to express them, really, because they're not going to delineate what you want, your truth.
I don't think you should. What I'm talking about is that not that you should go silent. What I'm talking about is that sometimes the emotions are so powerful that you can't help but to go silent, because the light is so big at that moment that it cannot find the vessels. As soon as you can think about it, it means the emotions like diminish to a certain degree that it now is you're able to think about it. So I don't think, maybe you should go silent in terms of speech, just because you don't want to say things you don't mean. But in terms of thought, like, I think when you can put it into letters of thought and start to process it, that's a sign that the emotion has like chilled out to a certain degree, that it's able to be handled and put into letters.
Maybe to be silent so that you can get to the willpower of the willpower.
Yeah, because it's
frustrating.
frustrating. It's even frustrating to try to put into a vessel to say it.
It may be frustrating, yeah, but this is also like the work, right? Is to put lights into vessels. Like it's a positive thing to channel and express yourself if you can, if it's done in the right way. So anyway, you have here the thought, speech, and action. This is in the reshus of the man. You have control over them. We just answered all our questions. Therefore, Yoshua was commanded. Right? There's a commandment and we said this is like an extension to every generation. There's a commandment, l'kol echad ve'echad l'tor livchon as a machshava dibur ma'aser shelo shiu kulam la'Hashem. That Yoshua was not told do it according to your own opinion. He was told you must go and spy out the land, because spiritually speaking, since you have control over your thought, speech, and action, therefore you have to. It's not optional. You must go spying them out and taking a look. Are my thoughts the ones that I want to be having? Is my speech the speech I want to be having? And spying it out is putting your eyes on that. And basically, if there was nothing you could do about it, so then you could ask yourself, well, really, what's the point of dissecting myself and just like looking at my problems. The truth is, if you have like a strong package of things that you can't change, it might not be the most wise thing to just like dwell on that. Dwell on something you can do something about, right? And that's what we say, your thought, speech, and action is something you can do about it. Therefore, you're commanded to go and spy it out. Not so when it comes to the feelings in the heart. Not everybody has control over their emotions. In fact, very few people do. Only tzaddikim, we say their heart is in their possession. Which is, by the way, you start to understand what a tzaddik is a little bit. It's a crazy entity of a person, right? They, just like you can like decide whether you want to think this thought or not. They can decide whether they want to feel this feeling or not. We cannot make that decision. Certain things happen, and you're like, okay, it's not the feeling is not your fault. You didn't design yourself. If certain events take place in your life, and you have an emotional reaction to that, that's involuntary, right? What you do with that emotion is voluntary, and therefore you can lash out and react, or you can control yourself and channel it into something positive. But the original emotional reaction is completely involuntary. It's part of what you are. You're like an animal in that way. You can't like really train an animal not to get excited when his master comes home. It's just that it just does, right?
But hang on, if your thoughts can, like in a way, affect your emotions, like you have the original emotion, but then you start thinking how you can think about it differently. It changes the emotion. It
doesn't.
You have control over your emotions.
No, it doesn't really change your emotion. It just either lets it come out or doesn't let it come out. Like we said before, if you don't put letters to the negative emotion, because that is in your control, I'm just not going to think about this, right? Then the emotion just goes dormant, because it's like a fire without fuel. There's nothing to carry it. If you don't give it a vessel to express itself in, it doesn't mean you don't have it. It just remains unexpressed. And if simultaneously you are thinking thoughts of Torah and mitzvahs, and you're giving you all of a sudden start meditating on the greatness of God and like humility and thanksgiving. So your godly soul also is packed with potential godly emotions. And when you give them letters of thought to express themselves, then they override and like sort of control the system. But it doesn't mean that you don't have those negative emotions. It means you're just not allowing them to express themselves. And so if you're really good, you don't even allow them to express themselves in thought.
That would mean all emotions are simultaneously happening at the same time.
Yes, they're just not necessarily like coming out at the same time. They're in potential at the same time. Yes, just like right now, you going around with your deepest state of meditation wherever you go, because you have that koach with you. You're going around with eyesight even when you close your eyes, right? Because you don't lose your powers just because they're not working, right? So
that takes a learning.
It takes a tremendous amount of things, learning, and then a tremendous amount of willpower and practice. Anyway, the point is that when it comes to the emotions, interestingly, tzaddikim have that power with their emotions. They're just like, no, I'm not going to feel that at all. Right? I don't even feel anger. And I can control that. Like, it's not, like, no matter what happens, I can control whether or not anger comes out or not. That's at levels of tzaddikim. Right? But regular people know. Therefore, the meraglim, the spies that Moshe chose to seek the whole land, which really, what was he trying to do spiritually? He was saying, go check out your emotions. He was like, go on a much deeper dive and find out not just what you're thinking and speaking, but like what you're feeling and understanding. Who are you? So you can verify that all of your emotions are only for God. Therefore, Hashem says, I can't command a person to do that. Right? I'm not going to command a person to go and and check out their deepest, like animalistic tendencies, because at the end of the day, if whatever they're going to find there, they're not going to be able to do anything about it, and it's kind of like a cruel task. So he says, I'm not commanding you. If you want to go and look at it, that's your business, right? But I can't tell you that you have to do it, because if I'm going to tell you have to do something, it's because there's like a utility to it that you can control something. I'm not commanding you. Ki avoda de kibush amirus b'shleimus he davka de gilu b'chinis Moshe ve'enu shav l'chol nefesh. And why is that? Because so why did Moshe send them then? What was Moshe? Why was it a good idea for Moshe if Hashem didn't think it was a good idea? Because there's nothing you could do about it. even if you find the problem. Because when it comes to conquering the midos, which is a full overtaking of your emotional world for God, you can only do that really if you have a revelation of Moshe inside of you. So Moshe can send the spies. He's the tzaddik, and also when he sends the shluchim, so to speak, he gives them the power that they are also able to accomplish tzaddik level business, and therefore, since that's not relevant to all people at all times, who knows if you're really feeling like you're on the mission from Moshe, that Moshe is supporting you in this. So when Moshe was literally supporting them in this, he sent them, and he could oversee the fact that he was going to ensure that they were having those tzaddik powers. Then he could say, go ahead and spy out the whole land. But as an eternal commandment for every Jew for all times, which we learned from Yoshua, no. Turning the page. Gimel. Vehine. HaTorah hi nitzchis. The Torah is eternal. Mizeh move on. From here it's understood. The fact that the Torah does tell us about the spies of Moshe and who are conquering the whole land. Okay, it's not a commandment from God to Moshe, but it's still like a parsha in the Torah that we're going to read every year. It's not like something we're going to overlook. So it's definitely relevant. So we still have an eternal instruction when it comes to even spying out your whole land. Your midos. First we understand what it says in Tanya. What's the difference in a tzaddik and a beinoni? We know that a beinoni primarily is working on his garments of the soul. Like we've been saying, this is like your average man. Machshava dibur maisa. This is midas shel kol adam. This is what everybody can be. In theory, you could be a beinoni, which means you have complete conquest of your thought, speech, and action. That's what I said. This is like really for everyone. שגם כשהלב חומר מיסה ואיזה טייבה ויכולתו להסאפק ולמשול ברוח טייבסו שבליבו שלא למעלוסה במעשה דיבר מחשבה. Because even though your heart will desire and you'll have this taivas for something basically in the world which is an animalistic drive, right? You nonetheless can hold yourself back and you can control your spirit, the spirit of passion that's in your heart, at least to the extent that you don't actually fulfill it even in thought, speech, or action. In other words, you can't hold it back from having the passion, but you can hold back from allowing it to surface. This is basically like suppressing yourself in a certain sense, which, truthfully, psychologically speaking, really has to be properly looked at, because I think, in my personal opinion, even though you might not see it on this page, but just from my experience of life, if you really are on a mission to just suppress your emotions, which is kind of what this is telling you to do, that could be in and of itself a dangerous thing to do in life, right? And nonetheless, this is definitely telling you to suppress your emotions. So the point is that if you want to just, this is like a parenthetical, just so we don't run off the page in a dangerous way. There is such a concept of a mashpia, right? Daigos alev ish yisichenu. There's a verse that says when a person has worries on his heart, he should speak it out. So if your worries on your heart is that you're feeling bad about your passions and your addictions and your lusts, right? And here it's telling you to bottle that up and never speak about it. Don't give it a vehicle of expression, which is like the high road of the Beinoni. The truth is that could be actually very dangerous theoretically on a person who's just not really processing what those emotions are. So there is room, right, in a Hasidic world, in my opinion, and not only room, but there's a necessity to actually give a certain level of expression to your negative passions, but only in an environment of looking for counsel and advice. And in that area, you're allowed to give voice, so to speak, to the bad guy inside, because in a certain sense, looking at him and seeing him and allowing another person, potentially a chaver or a mashpia, or even a fabrengen, even several people, to have a go at that and to bring out the negativity that's inside of you, that could be a very healing process, because at the end of the day, you want to see who the demon is, so that you can be attentive to when he's coming to attack you. Because one of the things that happens is you suppress it, and he finds like sort of like ways to sneak in where we're very sneaky. So if you identify him and you sort of like know your enemy, this actually is a helpful way to suppress him in a healthier way. Sorry just to put that in there because I find that there's a tendency to ignore that obvious point in some of our circles, and then it winds up leading to people who are like presenting themselves very strongly in a certain way, and they have a lot of unresolved issues. And when you say like, let's talk about it, like you got some traumas over there, it's like, I'm a Beinani, or I'm attempting to be a Beinani, so I don't even think about those things, right? That's not necessarily a healthy attitude towards life, in my opinion. But you have to put everything in context. Certainly when it comes to like, that's like in the practice room, right? When you're basically like trying to figure out who you are. When you're in battle and you're living your life, it's true you have to suppress. Because if you let out the wrong thoughts and the wrong speech at the wrong time, you could mamish destroy yourself. You know what I'm saying? And so there is like a behavioral model, which is extremely important here, where you just behave correctly and suppress your negative qualities inside. That's basically like your in-life go model. But when it comes to dealing with yourself and trying to, do that better and better as you go along, there is room for this, opening up these emotions, etc.
I was going to say, in psychology, there's something called cognitive behavior.
Yeah.
And so that means that you discuss whatever automatic negative thoughts you have.
Right.
But you discuss it not to go over it and over it.
Right.
To make yourself feel bad.
Right.
So, but you look at patterns and either cognitive errors.
Right.
I always do this. I never do this. There's something wrong with me.
Right.
The negative thoughts that you have. So then what a therapist would do is not suppress.
Right.
But go over it kind of more in Chabad.
Right.
You take
Right.
your Chabad.
Right.
And you organize those thoughts differently.
Right. So you're kind of, that's a deep work. Like that is like the work of like a tzaddik in a sense. But it's just, and that's what he's actually getting at, is that there is some kind of a conversation here about Moshe's spies, right? The whole conversation we're having is that even though when it comes to Yoshua, like you're commanded, so why is Moshe's spies even in the Torah? Like what does that have to do with us? Because there is at some level work that can be done on the emotional level as well. It's just that it's not always in your control, and therefore it's not like a commandment that you are absolutely obligated in. But it's an eternal lesson in the Torah, which means that you can take part in it as well.
Yeah, those are called stuck points. And then you go in there and you work on it by speech or writing.
Right.
And you restructure the idea, because stuck points is like that stupid word. I always do this. I always,
Right.
like that. Yeah. And you go and restructure you see that it's irrational, and then you come to a rational idea.
Let's just wrap up this paragraph. That was like a little parenthetical idea we're bringing in from the side there. So anyway, in general, what he's saying is, when it comes, in the Tanya, it talks about Beinani and Tzaddik. When it comes to the Beinani, no matter how much his heart desires and so forth, he can control it, at least not expressing itself through thought, speech, and action. In other words, to not, and he puts an important word in there, not to willfully think about these things. At least willfully. Non-willfully is nothing you can do, but not to willfully speak. You can actually completely remove your mind from it. You don't give any letters of thought to any negative emotions, and they can't express themselves at all.